Welcome to eVirtual. My name is Peter Wooding and thank you for joining us today. Today's session is aligning the aftermarket to customer expectations in a post-COVID-19 landscape. Today, I'm joined by three expert logisticians who will share their knowledge, experience, and insights as we move forward. So welcome to the virtual stage, Juan Santiago from Mercedes-Benz, Richard Hankinson from Unipart Logistics, and John Willems from FedEx. We will set the scene with two initial presentations, one from Richard and then followed by a presentation from John, which will steer to setting the scene for the panel discussion, which will be chaired by Juan. We will have questions coming live from the audience. If you please use that on live chat if you're putting any questions in. And now, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Richard, for the first presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world watching this. That's one of the advantages of doing this virtually. So my name is Richard Hankinson. I'm Automotive Director at Unipart Logistics, and I've had over 30 years of experience across the aftermarket supply chain and logistics in general, all within the automotive sector. And today, I want to talk about the alignment of customer expectation and what that means in terms of specifically with COVID. So I'm going to present some slides now, which I hope will come up on the screen, which will take you through. And I think just to start with, just to set the sort of scene as to why all of this is quite so important, the aftermarket really truly is the lifeblood of the automotive industry. The industry as a whole, by the current SMMT estimates, puts about 20 billion contribution into the UK economy. But to really highlight this, the aftermarket contributes 12 billion of that, and everyone thinks about the automotive industry being the flashy, shiny new products with wonderful technology that are coming to the market. But actually, the aftermarket is really where the cash cow is. And let's not forget that in the UK, the aftermarket alone provides 345,000 jobs within the economy. So it's a significant beast. In other words, it really matters, but it is very hard. And Professor Dan Jones of Cardiff University once described the automotive aftermarket as the most complex human endeavour on the planet. And I think anybody who's been in the industry will know that this is not easy. But how can we perhaps take a different view, and why do we need to take a different view in the environment that we're all in at the moment? Well, I don't think anybody's going to deny that the customer is king, and there is no difference in the automotive world and no difference in the aftermarket. And certainly I've lived in the US for a while, and I lived there at a time when Netflix was sending DVDs through your letterbox as a rental service, and the likes of the Blockbuster were just sitting up and taking notice of that, and some get a little bit concerned. And Amazon was just selling books, and the US book chains of Barnes and Noble were just starting to take interest with them and all this online stuff. So yes, I am that old, but the point being, this was all about convenience, and it's no doubt about it, the entire customer experience is driven by that demand for convenience, and ultimately what comes of that is greater experiences along the way. So I won't dwell on this too much, but as we go around the rest, if my clicker works. So as we get to that convenience, people are wanting that service instantly. It's not about I want to wait. It's I want it and I want it now. And that's, you can order anything from any point, any device, anywhere in the world, and you can often get it delivered within an hour, within the hour. And that's now hardwired into customer expectation. But the aftermarket hasn't stood still in the last few years. Increasingly, it's used more technology, it's used different ordering systems. And again, hopefully this will come up in a minute. Richard, can you click on if mine's not working? Are we still going? I'm losing the slide.
I could actually see them.
Okay, well, what I was going to say is that ultimately the technology that the industry's applied, we've done smart ordering, we've done anything up to AI chatbots, automated stock replenishment systems, all sorts of different techniques to again make life slightly easier for the customer. And over the years, we've also moved to overnight delivery, and that's now the bare minimum that is expected. So now let's move on to really the crux of the question. We put all of these services in place, but are we actually in danger of confusing customer expectation with the customer experience? And what do I mean by that? I think really and truly, this comes down to, let me illustrate with one very simple point. If you go and wrap your car around a tree today, it is clearly going to get taken off for repair. You do not expect that vehicle back tomorrow morning. You may have you may wish that were the case, but in reality, you're actually going to seek that car comes back perfectly repaired. And you don't expect that to be in 24 hours. So why do we persist in the industry in shipping major panel work and bonnets and bumpers and wings overnight delivery, when in reality that repair is probably going to take a day or two, sorry, a week or two. But the other experience is if you're driving in the rain and your windscreen wipers leaving smears all over your windscreen, you would expect to be able to drop by your dealer and collect a new windscreen wiper blade instantly. You would expect that to be there at the point that you ask for it. And that really is the point. There are different experiences that the customer is expecting, and yet we are currently treating everything as if it is a sort of a one-stop service. So what I would like to do is view this through the customer lens for just a moment and think about whether there's a smarter way. So again, I'm afraid my clipper's not working unless we can help. There we go. Thank you very much. So is there a smarter way here? On the service point, could we actually not start to look at this from a product segmentation perspective? Would we get, or would we be able to ship panel work out, not on an overnight delivery, but on a 2 or 3 day service, ground only, etc., etc. But obviously ship the critical wear parts like wiper blades out overnight. Also on the second point, measurements. So again, can Richard clip on 2 for me, please? Could we use smart metrics? At the moment, the industry typically looks at availability as one overarching measure, and yet that measure is taken at the point typically that the order is made, not at the point that the parts are needed. So again, should we be looking at smarter measurements? And whilst we're at it, why are we talking availability? At the very least, you need to be talking on time in full. And I know that's something John picks up on as well in his presentation. But actually, what we really need to be doing is, did the customer get their car back at the right point? At the point that they were expecting it. I go back to customer expectation. And finally, in terms of the processes, could we not be smarter? Could we not do pick by repair order? So the retailer workshops put in their order for Mr. Smith's car coming in on Thursday next week, and it's going to have this done with it. These are the parts. I don't want it tomorrow. I want it for next Wednesday, ready for Mr. Smith on Thursday. A nominated delivery day. And there's all sorts of other areas that you can do. Can you deliver direct to body shops rather than going through your retail network, franchise network, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's ways that we can look at aligning customer expectation with the customer experience. And again, on the next slide, it's really saying, how would we start to enact that? And with that, it's looking at, sorry, I beg your pardon. This is now saying, why would we actually need to do this? Well, clearly with COVID, if not now, when? The industry is already facing the uncertainty of the B word with Brexit, and that's the only time I will say the B word. But this is uncharted, completely unprecedented times. And I don't think any of us, when we were sitting down for Christmas lunch at the back end of last year, could remotely have predicted the predicament that we now find ourselves in. We have to become more efficient. It's now not a nice to have. This is an absolute compelling need for change. So we need to look at these things and make ourselves more efficient. There is a way to do this, as I say, by working smarter. So let's have a look, therefore, at the whole cost to serve model. Let's look at big data. Let's look at all of the intelligent supply chain aspects and make the system smarter, make it more efficient, make it cheaper, but actually align it more to what the customer is really, really, truly expecting. And I think that that gives us a great opportunity. That is where Unipart can help. We've got a whole suite of tools for that, and from whether that be the intelligent supply chain monitorings and control centers, to getting into the big data behind this and analysing things. But bottom line is, let's start at the customer and work backwards. We're very good at looking at how we change elements of the process, but let's just stop, take a step back, and go to the end of the chain of the customer. What do they need? And let's have a rethink around that. And that is my time. So I hope that that has been useful, and I look forward to having a bit more debate in the panel session coming up next. So now I'll hand over to John Willems, who is Head of Automotive at FedEx.
Okay, Richard, thank you very much. And everybody, welcome to this e-virtual conference, and good afternoon, morning, or evening. I think, Richard, you mentioned already a few interesting elements, the new model, how to serve the customers in the future, how to also serve not the end customer only, but also our customer, whom we have in the panel with Juan. So I think we can have a good discussion afterwards. What I would like to do is the aftermarket, explain a bit, set the scene about the complexity of the aftermarket, what we're dealing with, how that will the challenges that we face there, how that will impact the happiness, the customer experience. And also, I hope that we can have a good discussion afterwards about how the future should look like. 1 second to get. Yes. This is just an overview to set the scene of the playing field we are in. All the stakeholders, where it starts with the parts supplier. There is a contract packer in, there is the OEM with his global, regional, national warehouse. There are the dealer organizations, there are large dealer groups, there are small dealer groups. There are aftermarket deliveries that need to be made in the field for vehicles off road, or the agriculture business that is in scope as well. You see many type of stakeholders all serving the same customer and all want to deal with the same, all have to eat from the same pot of money, which is large, as Richard mentioned that is already. And to make it even a little bit more complex, we saw a few years ago the e-commerce business happening. So what we see is the tier suppliers start going direct into the market to the consumers, and not only direct to the consumers but also to the dealer organizations, bypassing in fact their customer, the car manufacturers. We have the independent aftermarket playing a role here, also going into the e-commerce business, direct to the consumers, even bypassing their own retail organizations. So we have seen with e-commerce already a substantial change whereby supplier-customer relationships suddenly become competitors. So knowing that in the automotive aftermarket, a substantial part of the profit comes from the aftermarket business, these challenges are all eating in that profitability. And on top of that, we have COVID now, which is another substantial disruptor and destroyer of that profitability. But as said, we'll hope to talk a bit more about that detail in a second. Oh, I go back one, yes. What probably Richard mentioned as well, the aftermarket is about the service to the end customer. You probably do not expect when you crash your car that it is ready tomorrow, but being in the field, having a lease car, if it is promised to be ready tomorrow 5 o'clock, you want to have it ready tomorrow 5 o'clock. So to achieve that, it is very important that parts are available. Parts get delivered on time in full. Repairs are executed according schedule, first time, on time and right. Also, as a dealer organization, an aftermarket organization, you want to have parts available to sell to the customers. Ideally, the original part being sold. And when that's not available, your dealers or other people start moving into the independent, what of course, from an OEM perspective, is a less preferred situation. And as a dealer organization, you want to have parts arrive on time, so you have scheduled your engineers to repair the cars in the day and have the workshop utilized as much as possible. Of course, that is all possible to achieve, but it does come at a cost. Inventories cost money. We can put piles of inventory in. We know what the costs are. Not the most preferred situation. On the other hand, you have a need for early morning deliveries. You have a need for the bigger parts, bonnet, hoods. Do they really need to be expressed next day? No. You can do that maybe in a 2-day service. So in order to deal with all these needs, you have to deal with multiple carriers. And we do come across situations that for aftermarket, servicing the aftermarket, dealing with 20-30 carriers could be pretty normal, but it is still a lot to manage. So Yes, servicing the industry, great, but it does come at a carrier management cost. Likewise, do you want to have specialists for the emergency shipments, or do you want to have the one-stop shop concept to deal with less carriers and have maybe maybe a little bit back on or service back on the deliveries, or do you want to have the specialists for each and any segment to have an excellent service? All kind of questions that we need to deal with, our customers need to deal with, and as you have seen in the previous picture, there are many stakeholders in which each their own requirements. So it is just to highlight the complexity in the aftermarket, and for a transport company, we're dealing with many of them in several ways. One second. Yes. What we see, a couple of trends that I mentioned already. The e-commerce business that kicked in. What we see as well is the CO2 emissions, the regulations driving the need for electrical vehicles. Electrical vehicles comes with lithium-ion batteries. That brings absolutely some supply chain challenges, and also from a transport perspective, it will come up with additional challenges and costs. E-commerce was said already. We have the connected cars, autonomous driving. Connected cars is great. These days, your dealer is calling you that your car needs maintenance because the car told him, rather than you making the appointment yourself, which is of course great for the dealer as he can plan the business better and have a better profitability there. And what we see as well now with COVID-19, that is an absolute disruption in the industry, where it starts of course with the production being completely down for 6 to 8 weeks, if not longer. The latest numbers I've seen go already up to now. There are 2 million cars not produced this year, and that number might go up even, which means there are 2 million cars not really necessarily less in the market to service. Less new cars mean more old cars and more aftermarket requirements, which could be a little positive impact. However, we have seen also in the aftermarket business dealers closing down or operating on low number of hours, which have caused a major cost effect. And this topic, the expected supply chain involvement, I think Richard mentioned it perfect. What are the customer expectations? They become more demanding. Is that realistic? Probably not in all occasions, but definitely I think we need to distinguish here maybe between the passenger cars vehicle and the commercial operations, where commercial standstill is of course a production stop, and that needs to be serviced anyhow, constantly, even if there is a COVID-19 or not. We have clearly seen the demand to service the commercial vehicle industry during the COVID period, as ambulances, fire extinguisher and all other emergency service need to be serviced even when there is a crisis. So all these kind of trends, customer demand, market changes, has an effect on the decision criteria from the industry, and not only our customers directly, which are often the car manufacturers or the tier suppliers, but also the demand side from dealers or the end consumers, who start ordering more and more online and want to have a delivery at home rather than at the dealer location. So I hope to have given an impression about the supply chain, the world, and the complexity we live in to deal after the e-commerce. I'm going to use the Brexit word as well, as that was a substantial change for the aftermarket supply chain, at least for the UK operations. And now on top of that, COVID. So where I said there might be the need for additional inventory, maybe in the UK operations have additional inventory as a result of Brexit and can deal with the situation now with COVID, where suppliers let them down on parts replenishment. But how will that look like going forward when we are back into the business? So I would like to close my my presentation with a question to Juan from an OEM perspective. Juan, seeing e-commerce, Brexit, now COVID, these changes and this disruption like COVID is, how has it impacted your business most? And what would you expect from the transport logistics industry to help you out there?
So, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, John. Thank you, Richard. Very interesting. I have to say that in the last years in the UK, in our company, we have been ready for Brexit, and this gave us a lot of, I'm not going to say headache, but of course we had to be ready for a hard Brexit. So we created different contingency plans to be ready, increase the stock, increase the inventory. But obviously COVID was something that nobody expected. And of course it created a lot of disruption in the beginning. And it gave us the chance to show how robust is our supply chain, our logistic organizations in the company in the UK, because we have to admit that we didn't stop working, because obviously we have a lot of customers, as you said, John, driving critical vehicles, a lot of ambulances, a lot of firefighters, or food delivery vans and trucks. So we never stop working, but we use the global network we have in all over the world with our company to check how things were doing or how things were done in other countries, Taiwan, Korea, Asia, when the COVID situation started. And we were ahead of the situation, ordering PPE earlier, ordering protection items, screens, securing the workforce, because what Richard said, of course, is true. Customer is king, but staff and workforce is also king, right? If we are not able to secure the deliveries, customer can be the king, but we have to make sure we are able to deliver the parts at the end of the day. So we were working hard with the team on site. We never stopped working. And to be honest, the feedback from our customers was amazing. I'm extremely proud of that. I'm not going to say that it hasn't created disruption. Of course, it did create disruption, but also gave us a very good impression about how ready we were to face these kind of situations. Yeah. So, John and Richard, what I would like to ask at this point is something came to my mind when, and I will address it to you, Richard, is in the future, in the next months, when COVID is over or some kind of over, how do you balance the innovation versus the basics? Okay, so before COVID, everybody was talking about disruption, innovation, do something new, try to be ahead of innovation. How do you feel the future? Because my personal opinion is, yes, innovation, never forgetting the basics. Okay, so never forgetting that at the end of the day, we have to deliver parts, we have to keep the people safe, we have to keep the operations running. So what's your view on that, Richard?
Thanks, Juan, and thanks to John for your presentation earlier. I think it's always, you've got to have that firm foundation. You have to have the basics, and you have to continually improve the basics. But typically, you're making step changes with your basic operation, getting slightly more efficient, increasing the service slightly. The big changes come from the innovation, the step changes. And yes, that was clearly what the business was looking for previously, and I see no change under COVID. In fact, I see more requirements to look for big ticket items that are going to drive service and cost. Automation, and John mentioned this in his presentation, I think we will see more and more trend towards automation. I think partly because it, in theory, de-risks some of the business. And I'm talking automation within the warehouse environment itself, but also potentially in connecting the entire supply chain better in order to have greater visibility, to be able to take decisions that will finesse the supply chain outcome, the service to the end customer, and potentially hold less inventory whilst doing so. So more intelligent decision making through technology, more efficient physical operations through technology and automation. The aftermarket in particular hasn't embraced technology historically, typically, general statement, I know. But I think it is a complex business in that one moment you're shipping an entire body shell and the next moment you are shipping that wiper blade. So automation is challenging, but I see definitely that will be more of a requirement going forward, if only to de-risk the business, as we've seen through COVID.
Okay, thank you. John, your view on this topic? I'm very interested from the service provider transportation point of view.
Yes, what we have seen is the absolute need of being flexible and reasonable, sensible, operating a large network of 700 planes worldwide, 100,000 of trucks and depots across the world, which is a large asset driven. So you need to scale the organization accordingly to make it reasonable and not keep flying empty, of course. But it also gives the opportunity to move the business and move the capacity to where it is needed. And from the moment that China opened again, especially in this case for the healthcare industry, we were able to offer the logistic industry in general capacity to fly from China back into Europe. The other element, what we have seen, what you need to do is people become creative in periods of crisis when it has to happen. And we have seen that within 2 or 3 weeks' time, we were able to set up a complete communication channel through a website informing the customer about the impact of COVID on all the services. The customers can check themselves from their shipping locations what the potential impact is. And we are in frequent contact with the customers to be ready when the business starts again. So if there is one thing that we have absolutely learned from this COVID disruption is the information provision to the customer, what is happening. Do not overpromise if you cannot deliver. If you normally have a next day, but now because of the reasons you can't access certain regions, you can't access certain countries, be clear to the customer about it that this is the situation. So communication, flexibility is what we have seen crucial during the COVID, but also that will help us restarting the business and help our customers restarting the business.
Yeah. Something that comes to my mind at this point is in this situation when you have, as you said, you have to be more efficient. You probably don't have to really do overnight deliveries and try to create some kind of product segmentation. We are really tracking very closely our customers these days, and we have cases of ambulances coming in workshops, and 2 hours later, whatever is the repair, they are out, 100% operational. So something that at least we are doing in our company here in logistics is empower people at offices, at the level of the offices, to really take decisions into end customers, right? If you feel that a customer, especially in the last weeks, a customer is really waiting for a part and that customer is critical, again, ambulances is a very good example. Do whatever is necessary to deliver that part as soon as possible. And then in order to do that, you also need a very strong group of partners, right, that are able to do and deliver those parts at that moment and following your instructions. So how do you feel, again, and John, maybe we're going to start with you, the product segmentation, like, as Richard said, bumpers or body repairs could wait a little bit longer. How do you balance that with the really critical customers where you have to deliver the parts at that right time? How do you feel that dilemma?
Yeah, thank you, Juan. That is a very good point, and I always fully agree. Does it make sense to fly on an express mode a bumper or a boot for a car that is crashed and is in a week in repair anyhow? So we have the fortunate situation that we operate a road transportation network and an air transportation network for the real critical shipments. And in those occasions where the network cannot be fast enough, you might have to move into direct vehicles, taxi type of services. But being a heavy asset driven organization, we have that capacity available. But I want to add one more thing, definitely for these emergency situations when it is really critical. Empower the people to take decisions, and maybe during the crisis period, empower them to take decisions beyond their normal authorizations. That is where we see that customer service and special service operations people are able and flexible to move and act quickly when there is such a specific customer demand.
Understood. Richard, the product segmentation that came to my mind when you mentioned it, and is something we are doing, because again, I think we have to try to be much more precise in terms of which parts are necessary at any point. How do you link that into maybe the question is a bit tricky, obviously, into the e-commerce, okay? Because the e-commerce at the end of the day is something we are all experiencing now. But how do you link, or how do you evaluate the urgency of an e-commerce order, let's say that way? What's your view on that? Can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Good question. I'll take myself off mute. Apologies. I think it all comes down to how the order has come into you. And that will give you, at least in theory, some pointers to what you need to do and how quickly you need to respond. And what I mean by that is, if it's coming through the e-commerce channel, the customer will usually have dictated or paid, potentially, for a type of delivery. Is it something that they want to get overnight? Is it something that they want to get for free delivery and get 3 days later, for instance? That's what we're used to in the e-commerce that we all use on a personal basis, and I see no difference in the automotive world. So we, as an organisation, do e-commerce for a number of our clients. In one case, for literally the entire product range, and in other cases, it is only sort of branded goods type product range that is done through the e-commerce route. But if you then take that back into the world of the franchise network, if they're placing an order, again, Juan, you mentioned your emergency vehicles and the fact that you clearly need to satisfy that quickly. Again, I mean, today the order streams are tiered, typically stock and VOR or emergency or whatever we call it. I would see no different in that going forward, but I would see the addition of potentially a delivery date. So yes, I'm ordering this on stock. I don't need it overnight, but actually I don't even need it, the day after tomorrow. I need it in 3 or 4 days' time. And I think that's where there is opportunity here yet. I think it would allow operations to become more efficient. It would allow smoothing of orders and workload and activity through the warehouse. In theory, smoothing and less running around at 300 miles an hour in terms of delivery and getting stuff out onto trucks at the last, rushing to get the last cut off. You know what I mean?
No, you're right, Richard. And I think one of the challenges that not only in the automotive sector, of course, but in all the sectors with the COVID is from the supplier till the end customer, how to make sure you are able to provide a proper delivery time, right? And I'm not talking only about automotive, I'm talking about everything, because during the COVID times, and we are still obviously in the COVID time, customs regulations, airplanes limited, cargo limited, all these factors obviously affect a lot in terms of when we can commit into a delivery time to our customers. And that brings me to Juan, what you said about the stock. That's why I also consider that it's important to keep a high inventory level when a crisis is coming, right? Or try to replenish your warehouse as much as possible, because you don't know exactly how situation all over the supply chain is going to be. So at least what we always do is, and Brexit was a good example, let's say the pre-Brexit, hard Brexit, when we top up, when we pile up parts to be ready. I think this is something we have learned out of this crisis and also with the COVID. So we still have 10 minutes and a couple of questions more coming is, maybe we'll go to you, Juan, that you are in charge of automotive and obviously quite a specialist in knowledge about the topic. How do you see the dilemma between the complexity of our automotive sector with the flexibility and cost reduction at the end of the day, right? How to find that balance? How to find that balance in terms of our business is more and more complex every day. Expectations of the customer, they are higher, but at the end of the day, we have to be efficient and obviously cost efficient at the end of the day. Where do you find that is the key points in that discussion?
Good, thank you, Juan. Very good question. That relates directly back to the topic what I said: service versus costs. What we do often is have a clear understanding where what the customer requirements are, having interviews with the customers, discuss what the needs are, and then reflect that back into the service offering and scale as much as we can. So we need to adjust our capabilities towards the needs, but prevent, of course, that you're going to individualize everything, as the cost needs to be at an acceptable level. So what I said earlier with with the COVID situation, if we are clear about the expectations, we can probably truck material rather than fly material and keep the cost for the customers, for the industry, acceptable. If there is absolutely the demand for next day, we can put it back on the plane. But if that is not needed and we can help the industry by moving it still definite on 2 days rather than 1 day, but reduce cost, that will benefit all of us in the end.
Thank you. I would like to probably close the session, if it's okay for you, by with a short summary of how do you see next month, what do you expect in the next month, and how do you see the supply chain moving forward into a much more efficient supply chain in the future. My view on that is, again, balance between being robust and resilience. So when the crisis comes, we have to be able to deliver the parts. That's the most critical point. We have to be able to keep our staff safe and our people safe. And at the same time, try to balance the cost of the supply chain in the future, but never jeopardizing the service, never jeopardizing the service and the needs of our customers. And again, a crisis like that, when all these kind of vehicles, ambulances, firefighters, police, and people probably don't think about supermarket deliveries, but obviously all the vans delivering food to Tesco, Sainsbury's, or other companies, so critical at that point, right? And so the balance between how to be cost efficient, 100%, but having the proper inventory, and of course having the proper workforce to deliver those parts into the customers is, for me, the critical key for the future. Richard, how do you see the future, the next months in the supply chain for automotive?
Yeah, just a small question. Thanks, Juan. I think this is, I'm going to take this in two parts. The first part is, it really comes down to the balancing of the resource and the capacity, the demand and the capacity. And that's something we're wrestling with across most of our operations now as volumes are starting to increase. We have a mixture of warehouses in the UK in particular that are either at one extreme just serving the UK market, and we're all coming very slowly out of lockdown. So we are seeing a slight rise in demand, which is great, but needs to be carefully balanced with the resources that we have around us, again, as you say, to ensure that we never let that customer down and that we always continue with the service. But we've also got warehouses that do global supply from the UK, and those have held up in overall volume slightly better, using services like John's to get the parts around the world. So balancing all of that is a very tricky challenge at the moment, and forecasting exactly what demand is going to do from day to day is difficult, but there is a general trend upwards. And then the second part of my answer is really around at a bigger level, a more macro level, the industry as a whole is going to be looking, I think, and we've touched on it slightly, much more around resilience and localization of supply. We've got supply chains that are just restarting. They're all in different states of flux and different conditions, whether that be production supply chains that are restarting slowly, tentatively in the UK, to the aftermarket, with a supplier that's still on the west coast of the UK, of the US, and still in shutdown. So it depends very much on the supply chain, but the biggest issue is managing effectively the return now of volume, how quickly that comes through. And as you said, Juan, the most important and most fundamental of all is to do it safely. And that is something that is, it's easier to manage when you've got 50% volume going through a warehouse it's easier to manage that safety with social distancing than it is when we get back to 100% volume. That's going to be quite a challenge.
Agree, 100% agree. Thank you. John, your summary, your views?
Yes, first of all, indeed, Richard, safety is important, and we have one driver on the truck, so one mask is okay, that's manageable there. But in the hub and depot operations, when volumes are back, that is going to be a challenge. But it has our full attention to secure the health and safety of the people. From a business perspective, we are now helping and looking how to help the suppliers, the car manufacturers in restarting the production. What we expect for the aftermarket as the new car sales expectations remain low for the next year, if not 2.5 years. So you probably will see the age of the cars increasing in the coming 1-2 years, having a higher demand on aftermarket and spare parts delivery. So we will have our focus on that segment as well, monitor what the needs are to supply the regional warehouses, the national warehouses and the dealers with the right services on time. And what are the right services is absolutely important to understand from our company, from our customers, what they want.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you very much. I think it's 8 minutes to 2 British Summer Time and 3 in your time, John. So I would like to thank you both and pass the last words to Peter. Peter, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Juan. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, John. Really enjoyed the session, and I'm sure that our viewers will have done the same. And thank you for your knowledge, but also your time. Anybody viewing from the world, if you did enjoy the session and you want to be kept up to date with any future ones, simply like and subscribe. And that way you can opt in and opt out to suit you. But let's all stay safe. Keep doing what we're doing in a different way. And hopefully look forward to when we can actually all get together in person, where we can relax a little bit more. Take care. Thank you all and keep safe. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers all.
Bye.